The August sun blazed down like a furnace on the towering pine canopy of Redstone National Reserve, its heat shimmering off the rocks and dirt in waves. 9-year-old Emma Whitaker trudged through the thick underbrush, her tiny boots crunching on pine needles, her left sock twisted uncomfortably in her shoe. She hadn't meant to wander far. It was just supposed to be a few steps off the trail, just a quick look through her binoculars. But now, everything looked the same. The sun was higher than she thought it would be, the shadows deeper, the silence louder. There were no sounds of her father calling, no chirp of distant walkie-talkies, just the occasional bird call and the uneasy rustle of wind through the trees. She stopped, turned around, and scanned the forest. Nothing but trees. Her heart thumped, harder in her chest. "Dad," she called out, trying to sound calm. Silence. "Dad, I'm over here." Only the birds answered. She blew out a shaky breath. Okay, just backtrack." But backtrack to where? Emma took a step, then another until the forest floor gave way beneath her. Her foot slipped on loose gravel as she stumbled forward, arms pinwheeling, and then crack. The world spun, and she hit the ground hard, her right ankle twisting beneath her. A flash of pain shot up her leg, sharp and hot, stealing her breath. Her binoculars clattered away into the brush. She tried to move, then cried out, grabbing at her ankle. Everything after that blurred. Trees spinning overhead, heat pressing, down like a heavy blanket, her breathing turning shallow and frantic. She dragged herself to the shade of a large pine tree, back scraping against the rough bark, and curled into herself, trying to will the pain away. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. The sun kept moving, her throat was parched, her lips cracked and bleeding. The single bottle of water she'd had earlier was long gone. Her phone had no bars. The emergency whistle around her neck was useless now. She'd blown it until her breath ran out and nothing came of it. She'd tried to be brave, tried to think like her dad always told her. Stay put, don't panic, and we'll find you. But as the light faded and the woods crept closer with every shadow, her courage began to crack. Her eyelids fluttered, her head lolled. And then a sound. Not the wind. Not a bird. Footsteps? No. Pause. Heavy and fast. Emma blinked, trying to lift her head. The pain in her ankle screamed at her, but she pushed through it. Through the brambles, movement emerged. Not one, but several figures, shapes low to the ground, fast and muscular. Dogs. Her breath hitched. At least 5 of them padded silently out of the trees and into the clearing, their fur glinting in the dimming light. They were all large, strong German shepherds. Their coats varied in color, sable, black, and tan, even one with patches of silver. They didn't bark, they didn't snarl, they didn't even pant heavily. They simply watched her. At the front stood a striking black shepherd, its fur thick and glossy, ears alert, amber eyes fixed straight on her. There was something about this dog, something still, intelligent. It didn't move like a stray. It didn't act like a wild predator either. Emma's heart raced. She opened her dry mouth, voice trembling. "Are you here to help me?" The black shepherd didn't answer, of course, but it took a single step forward, then stopped, tail still, gaze unwavering. Emma felt her fear fade just a little. The dog wasn't threatening. If anything, it looked curious, concerned even. It stepped forward again, another followed, then a third. The group fanned out slowly, cautiously, never coming too close. Emma couldn't understand it. She'd heard of wild dogs before. Some people called them dangerous, aggressive. But this was something else. They seemed organized, like they knew exactly what they were doing. The black one, the leader, sat down about 6 feet away. Just sat there, head tilted slightly, eyes never leaving hers. Emma let her head fall back against the tree. "I think I'm dreaming," she whispered. The dog didn't move. Minutes passed. The heat began to fade with the sun. The forest turned gold, then amber, then gray. Emma's body trembled, not just from the pain, but from the creeping cold that came with nightfall in the Oregon high country. She closed her eyes, barely able to keep her thoughts straight, but just before sleep pulled her under, she felt it, a presence closer than before. She opened her eyes again. The black shepherd was now only 2 feet away. He didn't make a sound, didn't bare teeth, just stared. And Emma, through the haze of exhaustion and fear and pain, reached out a shaky hand toward him. The shepherd didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned his head forward, gently pressing his muzzle into her palm. Warm, soft, solid. Emma choked out a breath that was half a sob. For the first time in hours, she felt something close to hope. "I don't know who you are," she whispered, "but please don't leave me." And somehow, in the quiet of the pine woods, the black dog seemed to understand. His ears twitched, his eyes softened, and he lay down beside her. The others followed, forming a loose circle around the girl, keeping watch as the stars blinked, awake above the treetops. There were no growls, no howls, just silent guardianship as the wind picked up and the temperature dropped. The black shepherd remained close, his body a warm presence beside her injured leg. She looked at him one last time before drifting into sleep. "Shadow," she murmured. The name slipped from her lips like it had always belonged to him. Then the darkness took her, but this time she didn't feel alone. Long before the forest swallowed her, Emma Whitaker had always seen the world through curious eyes. Back home in Bend, Oregon, she was known in her 4th grade class as the quiet explorer, the kid who never raised her hand but always turned in essays filled with strange facts about volcanoes, sea turtles, and ancient cave systems. She didn't talk much, but she noticed everything. It was her gift and sometimes her curse because while other kids talked loudly about playground drama or TikTok videos, Emma sat on the sidelines, clutching a library book or drawing tiny maps in the margins of her notebook. Her mom used to say, "She's got an old soul." Her dad preferred, "She just likes her own world." And that world had never included dogs, not because Emma didn't love them, but because her mom was allergic to pet dander. Emma had begged once, at age 6, for a golden retriever after watching Air Bud. Her mom had sneezed for 5 straight minutes in the pet store lobby and then gently explained why it wouldn't work. So Emma settled for dog books, dog posters, and the occasional visit to her friend Leia's house, where a shaggy mutt named Toby greeted her like family. She learned about breeds, behaviors, body language. She watched documentaries and read every single book about rescue dogs in the school library. She didn't need to own one to love them. And when her dad surprised her with a weekend camping trip to Redstone Reserve, it wasn't the marshmallows or the stargazing that excited her most. It was the chance to maybe, just maybe, spot a wild animal up close. The morning they left, she'd climbed into the truck with her binoculars hanging around her neck and a copy of Dog Heroes of the Wild stuffed into her backpack. Her dad smiled at her through the rearview mirror. "You've got the heart of a little explorer, you know that, Emma?" She grinned. "Then let's find something no one's ever found before." Now, huddled against a pine tree with a swollen ankle and a mouth dry as dust, Emma would have traded that something for a bottle of water and a walkie-talkie. It had been almost a full day since she fell. Her stomach ached, her skin felt stretched over her bones, but worst of all was the burning in her throat, like she'd swallowed hot sand and couldn't cough it back up. She tried to shift, wincing as a bolt of pain shot through her leg. Her fingers trembled as they grasped for her backpack, now lying sideways in the dirt a few feet away. The last granola bar had been eaten sometime the night before. She hadn't realized how fast hunger and thirst would creep up. In her adventure books, the characters always lasted for days, but fiction didn't account for the real weight of silence, or the way the air seemed to thicken with every hour you spent alone. And yet, she wasn't alone now. Shadow still lay beside her, not touching, but close enough that she could feel his presence, steady and calm. His ears flicked at the sound of every bird call, his amber eyes scanned the trees like a sentinel. He had barely moved since the others circled up the night before. She didn't know their names, didn't know if they had names, but in her mind, she began giving them identities. The smaller tan shepherd with a crooked ear became Finn. The long-legged sable female who kept circling and sniffing the air became Vera. The pregnant-looking one who'd pressed up against her in the cold of the night became Mira. They weren't pets, that much was clear. They were too lean, too watchful, too independent. But they weren't wild in the way wolves were wild. There was intelligence in their eyes that told her they understood. Shadow stood suddenly, his head snapped toward a patch of dry brush about 10 yards away. Emma's breath caught. "Is someone coming?" she whispered. But the movement in the bushes turned out to be nothing more than a lizard scurrying across a sun-bleached rock. Still, the alert had roused the others. Mira stood up and stretched. Vera trotted closer to sniff the air. Then Shadow did something Emma didn't expect. He padded over to a large, cracked tree stump, its bark gray with age, and its base surrounded by loose gravel and hard-packed dirt. He sniffed, ears twitching. Then he began digging. Emma blinked, unsure what she was seeing. The other dogs watched, unmoving as Shadow worked his powerful paws, scooping dry earth like a backhoe. Dust clouded the air. He dug with rhythm, left, right, pause, sniff, again and again, until a shallow pit began to form. "What are you doing?" Emma croaked her voice. Shadow didn't stop. After a minute, he paused and lowered his muzzle to the hole, and then he backed away, his tongue licking a flicker of moisture on his whiskers. Emma strained her neck, squinting. Her heart skipped. Water, a tiny sheen of it, not a puddle, but enough to darken the soil. Shadow leaned down, lapped at the damp spot, then turned to Emma. He approached slowly this time. She noticed the others stay back as if giving him space. He reached her side and lowered his muzzle near her hand. Drops of water clung to his tongue, his chin, his whiskers. Gently he let his tongue swipe her fingers. A moment later, cool wetness touched her skin. It wasn't much, barely enough to coat her fingertips, but it was something. Emma's eyes filled with tears. She tilted her head and let her dry lips brush against the damp fur of his chin, catching what little she could. "Thank you," she rasped. Shadow didn't move. He sat beside her, regal and still, as if this moment mattered. She closed her eyes, moisture lingering on her lips. It was hardly enough to make a dent in her thirst, but it lifted the crushing weight of helplessness just a little. After several minutes, Mira approached. She too had drunk from the spring. She stepped closer than before, and dipped her nose to Emma's wrist. Her breath was warm, her fur surprisingly clean. Then she nudged her side gently but deliberately. It felt like encouragement. Emma looked up at the trees above her. The sky was still blue, but the edges were fading. She had maybe a few more hours of daylight. She didn't know how far she'd wandered, didn't know if her dad was looking. But she knew this. These dogs were more than coincidence. They weren't lost. They'd found her. And if her instincts were right, they weren't done helping yet. The forest turned blue as the sun disappeared behind the pines, and Emma Whitaker felt the cold creep in with every passing minute. Her hoodie, damp with sweat from earlier in the day, offered little protection now. The wind was no longer playful. It sliced through the trees, rattling the leaves and whispering through the clearing like it carried secrets only the wild could understand. Emma pulled her knees to her chest, her injured ankle throbbing beneath the pressure. The pulse of pain was steady now, like a cruel clock ticking in time with her heartbeat. She'd tried to distract herself, counting stars as they blinked into the darkening sky, but even that was hard now. Her head felt heavy, her body sluggish. The cold was stealing her focus. A sharp rustle to her left made her flinch, but it wasn't danger that emerged from the shadows. It was Mira, the pregnant German shepherd, with soft brown eyes and a belly that swayed gently when she moved. Mira approached slowly, paws quiet, against the pine needles. Emma watched through half-lidded eyes as the dog stopped just inches away. "You came back," Emma murmured, her voice thin and broken. Mira lowered her head, sniffing gently near Emma's leg. Then, without warning, she lay down, curling her warm body right up against the girl's side. The sudden heat made Emma gasp. The dog was warm, really warm. Emma instinctively leaned into her, her hands resting on the dog's fur. It was thick, slightly coarse, but dry and comforting. Mira shifted slightly, adjusting herself so that her flank rested against Emma's hip, just enough pressure to steady her breathing. Moments later, Finn and Vera approached. The smaller male lay down at Emma's feet, his nose brushing her sock. Vera took position behind her, settling into a protective crouch with her chin resting across Emma's shoulder blades. She was surrounded. A slow tear slid down Emma's cheek, tracing the dirt smudges across her face. It wasn't sadness, not fear, just relief. A quiet, bone-deep release that came from no longer being alone. "You're like angels with fur," she whispered. None of the dogs responded, but they didn't need to. Their presence was answer enough. Emma drifted between sleep and awareness as the night wore on. In one lucid moment, she thought she heard her father's voice echoing across the trees, calling her name. But when she opened her eyes, there was only the darkness, the dogs, and the soft rhythm of Mira's breathing beside her. Her hands searched, instinctively for something, her backpack, her flashlight, she didn't know. All she found was fur and warmth, and then, without thinking, her gaze shifted to the tall, silent form of Shadow. He was standing now, several feet away near the base of the tree stump where he'd dug the water earlier. His head was tilted, ears forward, eyes locked on her. Emma blinked. Shadow stepped forward. He approached her slowly, then knelt beside her injured leg. His eyes flicked to her ankle, swollen and bruised, and then to her face. He leaned down and began licking the skin just above her sock, his tongue warm and raspy. Emma tensed, unsure if it would hurt, but somehow it didn't. Instead, the touch was gentle, almost deliberate, as if the dog understood where the pain lived and chose not to cause more. "I'm okay," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if it was for him or herself. Shadow licked once more, then shifted his focus to her sneaker. Emma frowned. The laces. He began pawing at them softly at first, then more purposefully. His claws caught the knot, loosening it. Slowly, Emma let out a small laugh, the sound shaky. "Are you trying to take my shoe off?" The shepherd didn't respond, of course, but continued his focused attempt. One of the loops unraveled. Emma watched, in awe. She'd read stories of rescue dogs before, ones who dragged injured hikers to safety or barked for help. But this wasn't trained behavior. No one had taught these dogs to do this, and yet here they were, acting with purpose as if they had decided amongst themselves that she was theirs to protect. Shadow stopped his efforts and stood again. He padded a few steps away, lifted his nose to the air, and let out a long, low howl. It started soft, rising with each breath, echoing off the canyon walls like a haunting song. It wasn't a panicked sound, not desperate. It was more like a signal, a beacon. A moment later, Finn joined in, followed by a sharp bark from Vera, then silence. Shadow stood perfectly still, scanning the tree line, his muscles tense. He turned to the others, ears twitching, then trotted toward them. Emma watched as he seemed to communicate, nudging Finn with his snout, exchanging a quiet whine with Vera. Then, without hesitation, Shadow turned and bolted into the darkness, disappearing between the trees with Finn and Vera right behind him. Emma pushed herself up on her elbow. "Wait, where are you going?" But they were already gone. Only Mira remained, curled protectively beside her, breathing steady. Emma dropped, back onto the forest floor, heart pounding. She didn't understand it, couldn't explain it, but somehow she knew they were going for help. She didn't know how or if it would even work, but deep down in that quiet, trusting place all kids still carried, she believed it. The dogs were coming back. She closed her eyes again, letting Mira's warmth wrap around her like a blanket, and, for the first time since she'd gotten lost, she slept without fear. The sun was barely rising over the pine-covered hills when Ranger Tessa Graham pushed open the creaky door of the Redstone Fire Lookout Station. Steam curled from the coffee in her thermos, but she barely noticed. Her focus was locked on the growing map of the search area taped across the whiteboard, a sea of red markers where teams had already looked and come up empty. 3 days. That's how long the Whitaker girl had been missing. 3 days in the wildest stretch of forest this side of the Cascades. Tessa rubbed a tired hand across her face. She was only 28, but the last 72 hours had etched lines across her forehead that hadn't been there before. It wasn't new to search and rescue coordination, but a missing 9-year-old, that hit different. She'd met Emma briefly the day they arrived, polite, observant, quiet as a whisper. The kind of kid who didn't draw attention, just disappeared into the background. And now she disappeared into the forest. "Morning," a voice behind her said. It was Eli Drake, a seasoned wilderness tracker and the closest thing Redstone had to a human compass. "She's still out there, Tessa," he said, no pleasantries. Tessa didn't answer. The thought was unbearable. Just then, a shout came from outside. "Hey, you guys seeing this?" They rushed to the window. 3 large dogs, German shepherds, stood at the edge of the clearing just beyond the ranger station's perimeter fence. One was black, big, sleek, its eyes sharp even at a distance. Another, leaner and younger, paced with nervous energy. The third barked once, short and sharp. They weren't wearing collars. They weren't part of any nearby K9 unit. They were wild. Tessa's brow furrowed. "What the hell?" She stepped outside, coffee forgotten, boots crunching on gravel. The black shepherd's shadow, though she didn't know his name yet, locked eyes with her. Then he barked a loud, commanding sound and took 3 steps back toward the tree line. Then he stopped, turned, looked back as if saying, "Follow me." "They're trying to tell us something," Tessa murmured. Eli scoffed. "They're probably just looking for food." "No," she said. "Look at them. That's not random." Just then, the third shepherd sprinted a few yards, then stopped, turning back again, its body tense, urgent. "I've seen that look before," Tessa muttered. "They want us to follow." Eli hesitated, then nodded. "All right, let's saddle up." Within minutes, Tessa, Eli, and 2 other rangers, Maya and Cole, were packed and ready. They grabbed med kits, emergency blankets, water, and radios, then set out on foot, trailing the dogs as they darted between trees and bounded over rocky slopes. The dogs didn't lead them in circles. They moved with purpose, always ahead, but never too far to lose sight. Occasionally, the black one would stop and glance back, his gaze checking to make sure they were keeping up. For nearly an hour, the team climbed ridges, crossed dry creek beds, and passed broken branches that looked freshly disturbed. Then came the scent. Eli was the first to stop. "You smell that?" Tessa paused, nostrils flaring, sweat, earth, and something human, faint, but undeniable. The dogs barked again, closer this time. Then, from a break in the trees ahead, came a soft, thin voice. "They came back." Tessa dropped her pack and ran. There, slumped against a pine tree, was Emma Whitaker, pale, dirt-streaked, her hair matted and tangled, but alive. Mira lay curled at her side, head raised protectively at the sight of the rescuers. She didn't move. She just watched. Emma blinked up at them, lips cracked, eyes glassy. "They saved me," she rasped. "The dogs, they came back." Tessa knelt beside her, gently brushing the girl's hair from her face. "You're okay now, sweetheart. We've got you." Emma reached for her hand, grip like paper. Maya moved quickly, checking her vitals. "She's dehydrated but stable. Pulse is low, but steady." Cole radioed back to base. "We've found her. Repeat, we found Emma Whitaker. She's alive." Cheers erupted through the line. Tessa looked around for the black shepherd, but he'd already stepped back, his job done. Finn and Vera stood beside him, panting softly, tails low. "They led us right to her," Eli said, shaking his head. "I don't know how, but they did." Tessa turned to the trees, scanning for any sign of a human footprint. Nothing. No trail markers, no gear, just dogs, just instinct. She watched as Shadow stepped toward Emma once more, just close enough to meet her eyes. Emma gave a weak smile, barely able to lift her hand in gratitude. Then, just as silently, he turned and walked away. One by one, the others followed him, Mira included, vanishing into the pines without a single bark or glance back. Tessa stared after them for a long moment. They weren't just protecting her, she said. They were watching over her. Eli gave a slow nod. Wild doesn't always mean savage. As the helicopter arrived to airlift Emma to safety, Tessa stood back and watched the girl disappear into the sky. Shadow and his pack were gone now, but what they left behind would echo through the woods and the hearts of everyone on that rescue team for years to come. 6 months later, winter had given way to spring in the Redstone National Reserve, and with it came a renewal that seemed to reach every corner of the forest, from the early bloom of wildflowers carpeting the valley floor to the distant howls echoing faintly across the ridgelines. Emma Whitaker stood quietly at the edge of a wide, fenced clearing near the Redstone Wildlife Research Center. She wore a soft gray beanie and a green jacket with her name stitched just above the pocket. Her once bruised ankle had long healed, though she still walked with a slight caution when the ground was uneven. In her arms was a small clipboard and a notebook with worn corners. Her voice had grown stronger, though she still didn't use it much. She didn't have to. When she spoke now, people listened, especially when she talked about the dogs. The Redstone Shepherds, as the media had come to call them, were the subject of national attention, academic debate, and more than one viral news segment. But for Emma, they were simply the dogs who had saved her life and changed it forever. She leaned against the wooden railing and scanned the tree line across the field. They always came in from the west. Behind her, the research facility buzzed with quiet energy. A team of biologists and behavioral specialists worked in hushed tones, tracking the pack's movements through GPS collars and motion sensor cameras. But no one tried to capture them. That had been part of the agreement with state officials, wildlife authorities, and a governor who had once said after watching the rescue footage, some rules were meant to be broken. These dogs proved that. Dr. Callum Hayes, the project's lead behavioral ecologist, joined Emma at the fence, a tablet in one hand, a thermos in the other. "Cold morning," he said, nodding toward the frost still clinging to the grass. Emma smiled faintly. "They like it better this way. Most wild animals stay away from the clearing," he said, "but these guys, they know it's safe. They know we're listening," she replied. Hayes chuckled. "You sound more like a scientist every day." Just then, movement in the trees caught her eye. Mira emerged first, her coat thicker now and her gait slightly slower since giving birth a few weeks earlier. At her side trotted a pale tan puppy, his steps still clumsy but full of purpose. A white blaze streaked down his nose, the same marking that Shadow bore, and now this pup too. Emma pressed a hand to her chest. "That's him," she whispered. "That's Brave." The pup sniffed the air and bounded a few steps ahead before turning to look at his mother. Mira gave a low, encouraging grunt, then padded forward again. More figures followed. Finn, Vera, and 3 new members Emma hadn't seen before, but the one who brought the breath to catch in her throat was last. Shadow, the black shepherd, stood at the edge of the trees for a long moment, ears high, eyes scanning the open space. Then slowly, he walked forward. Emma stepped back from the fence and walked out into the clearing, alone. Hayes didn't try to stop her. The others watched in silence as girl and dog met again beneath the pale morning sky. Shadow approached carefully like he always had, never too fast, never too eager. Emma knelt on one knee, holding out her hand. He pressed his muzzle into her palm, and for a few seconds neither of them moved. "You came back," she whispered. "I knew you would." Brave trotted forward, sniffing Emma's boot. She giggled softly and let him nuzzle her wrist. Mira stood nearby, tail flicking gently, eyes calm. The moment felt sacred. Later that day, Emma stood in front of a group of visiting school children who had arrived for the wildlife education program the center now offered, one that included her story, her survival, and what it meant for the relationship between humans and animals. The children sat cross-legged on the grass, wide-eyed as she told them about the night in the woods, the warmth of the dogs around her, and how Shadow had led the rangers back. Behind her, Hayes projected drone footage of the pack's movements, tracking patterns, behaviors, family structure. The research was groundbreaking, the data undeniable: intentional communication, pack cooperation, adaptive problem-solving. But Emma didn't use technical terms. She just told the truth. They didn't grow up in homes, she said, her voice calm but clear. They weren't trained. They didn't know me. But when I was alone and hurt, they came. They stayed. They kept me warm. They brought me water. And one of them, Shadow, he didn't stop until I was safe. A girl in the front row raised her hand. Did they know you were a person like a kid? Emma smiled. I think they knew I needed help, and that was enough. Another child asked, What happened to the puppy? Emma's face lit up. He's doing great. His name is Brave, and he has a little brother now too. Mira had another pup last month. The class gasped with delight. At the end of the presentation, Hayes walked over and gave her a quiet nod. You're the best part of this program, he said. Emma looked toward the trees again, where she knew Shadow and his pack were watching from the shadows. They're the best part, she said softly. That evening, as the sun dipped below the ridge and painted the forest gold, Emma returned to the clearing one last time. Shadow was waiting. He stood alone now, Mira and the others resting in the brush beyond. His body had filled out over winter, stronger, more commanding, but his eyes were still the same. Intelligent, quiet, knowing. Emma walked to him slowly, then knelt and rested her forehead against his. Thank you, she whispered. Shadow stepped back, surveyed her one last time, then turned and disappeared into the trees. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. Because what he had done, what they all had done, would live on in every story told, every life touched, every child who learned from what had once been dismissed as just wild instinct. They were wild, yes, but they were also watchers, guardians, and in Emma's case, saviors. And in breaking every rule people believed about how wild animals should behave, these dogs had done something extraordinary. They had rewritten them all.